Some background on Michael. I went to this, I call it an executive coaching inner space, and they have this thing called Founder Circles. Michael actually was at Founder Circles as one of the founders at I'd call it like a small group. I feel like you gave a lot of insight at this thing that we did. I think that this is going to be an interesting podcast for me because I don't really know that much about you. You kind of gave me just insights about company strategy and that sort of thing throughout the executive coaching that we did together. From what I know about you, you started in the founder circles that we were in. You were in the gaming industry specifically. Why gaming? What is it about gaming that got you into it? Gaming, it's just a super interesting industry.
I started, I guess, as an entrepreneur in finance. In 1998, I started a company called StockJungle.com, which was at the height of the start of the internet. It was a very euphoric time and it was really fun. That ended up leading to kind of working in finance, and we created a successful company, my partners and I, in the financial services space. And it was actually, we were just kind of bored. We didn't really find the industry to be very much fun. And two of my partners, we loved playing games. So we were like, it'd be really fun to make games because making financial products is just not that exciting. We ended up selling the company to a private equity firm. I ended up starting a company at the start of the Facebook platform, a social gaming company. And I just saw that there was an opportunity in the market. I didn't know what it was going to become, but I just felt there was something happening with MySpace and Facebook, and the games were going to be a part of that new world. And I didn't know how it would turn out. I didn't have any crystal ball. I just thought it was a fun space to be in. That's kind of why I just started a gaming company and still have a game studio, Redemption Games. And so that's been like now 10 years. Making games is not near as fun as playing games. That's the one lesson I learned. Facebook opened their platform in 2008.
So it was right time, right place kind of thing. I remember Zynga coming out and like these really large, successful gaming companies. So you started literally in 2008, like right when it launched.
Yeah, so we were trying to build a game actually to be live the moment that the Facebook platform launched. And the reason we were there at that time is because I was starting to build a game on MySpace, which was the dominant platform at that time. We kept trying to make this social game. It was called My Gladiator. And it was going to be like this fighting game where you had a gladiator and you trained him and let him fight. And we kept trying to make it work on MySpace. And we ran into all these problems of not being able to hack their platform, right? It was a very closed environment. And then Facebook announced that they were going to create a platform and create all these APIs that would allow us to do all these things we were trying to do on MySpace. And we're like, hey, that's pretty cool. That's going to allow us to do things that we've been wanting to do very easily. And we saw a lot of excitement building there. And so we tried to get there at the start. Ultimately, I missed the starting window, but I was trying to be there. I didn't make it quite at the start. Maybe it would have been a better outcome if I had, but it was still early enough that over time we were able to figure it out and have some success on that platform.
I've heard that building your company on top of the Facebook platform is like building the most profitable hot dog stand in the world on top of an active volcano.
That's a good analogy.
How did you find that experience?
Yeah, I would say that it was a two-sided sword, right? I think that it cut both ways. And in one hand, like you had this platform that was growing so fast, you could get millions of organic users in a very short period of time. So that was awesome. And then you would have Facebook change its policy as they were figuring out their platform that could just wipe out your app without any notice and without any recourse. And so it was very volatile. And it's always become now my quest personally is I would rather own the platform, right? Rather than be an app on somebody's platform. But there's very few platforms that are successful. So it's hard to get there. But so I think it kind of sucked being a developer on the Facebook platform in the early days from a developer relationship. But it was awesome in 2008 to be in a world where everything was blowing up, and if you found the right app, you could have millions of users in a matter of days, which we did. We had some apps that in 6 weeks we're at 1 million DAU. It's hard to fathom now, but back in those early days of Facebook, the easy growth was really astounding.
What were some of the growth hacks that you used to make that happen?
When we started on Facebook, I ended up meeting an early investor in PayPal, and he said, hey, have you heard of the viral coefficient before? And I was like, no. And he started to explain to me how at PayPal they had tracked the virality of their platform, and it's just a simple math formula, right? I remember going after that conversation, I went home and I looked at Google and I said, all right, I'm going to find out what this viral coefficient. And there was nothing. There was not a search result on it for if you search viral coefficient. That's evolved so much since then. But so just understanding the viral coefficient early days on Facebook was huge in allowing you to understand the factors that caused strong viral growth. And the ultimate hack on the early days of Facebook was having people invite their entire friend list with a single click of a button. Right? Because if you got people to do that, whether they realize they were doing it or not, like it just creates huge virality, because that's one of the parts of the equation of the viral coefficient, right? Is the number of invites that are being sent out for each person that has an intent to share your app. In the old days, Facebook didn't even limit that. If you had 100 friends and you got this app and you said invite all, it's like, bam, 100 invitations went out, just frictionless. And so it caused this huge growth that was really fun. And so you'd see these apps like blow up overnight. There was just all kinds of hacks. It was a constant cat and mouse game between Facebook and the developers. Developers are always trying to just, how do we hack the platform? How do we get people to send out invites? How do we create the flows so that you maximize organic downloads? We did everything everybody was doing. It was just everybody was watching what everybody else would do. The minute somebody figured out a new way to do it, it would just be copied across all the developers. And it was fun. Those were good old days.
Did you ever have any apps that you put a lot of work into, but then Facebook changed their platform policy and you kind of had a loss of all that effort?
I have a pretty interesting story. As we had matured a little bit and as a developer on the platform, we ended up doing a game for a large media company, a well-known large media company. And they hired us to build kind of a companion app on Facebook. We spent a lot of time and money and effort building this game. Our friend, who the producer on this game from the big media company, had a big presentation in front of a room full of people to demonstrate this new Facebook app, right? They were breaking ground and frontiers and showing how they're being innovative on social media. And he went to bring up the app and it was gone from Facebook. Facebook had auto-deleted the app entirely.
Oh no, it violated policies or something?
Facebook had created triggers because they were combating, like, how do we stop this app spam? And so it had just started to have the growth triggers that it fell into an automatic profile that Facebook just deleted it. And so like I scrambled to go through friends that I had at Facebook and I was like, what happened to my app? And they're like, oh man, you didn't whitelist it, and so it got auto-deleted. And I was able to get it restored within a couple of days, but it was just unfathomable to this media company that this app and they're a big brand name could just be auto-deleted. So it was kind of funny. It was kind of funny. Then it was like, oh my God, I can't believe this just happened. That's kind of typical of like the Wild West days that it was back then.
Would you say gaming is a unique industry? It sounds very stressful being almost at the whim of Facebook, hiring people and running a company. It sounds like it's almost like the movie industry. You spend a lot of energy and effort to building these games. It's so different than a finance piece of software, right? Or maybe not. I mean, there's risks involved in everything. But I guess the gaming industry, it almost feels like the movie industry in that sense. How do you create this mega hit?
The gaming industry is really, I think, an amplified version of a hits-driven business. So, you can do it. You can have the best team and the best people, and you can make the best decisions that you are capable of making in terms of making a product. But at the end of the day, there's still a little pixie dust of magic and timing and good fortune that has to land on you for that game to be successful. Because in the games business, the reality is that most games are not successful. I think that there's well over 1 million games that have been launched, just for example, on Apple, and like there's only 10 top 10 games, right? And the top 10 grossing games on Apple hasn't changed that much over the last few years. So you think about, it's really the 0.1% or 0.01% of the games that are able to really make a massive impact and be huge financially successful. It's
really kind of a winner takes all type dynamic.
Absolutely.
Extreme, like Pareto's principle, like the top 1% gets 95% of the gains.
I've never heard
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's that on steroids, right? So like if you think about like I was in finance, right? And so it's always kind of funny, right? Because you look at the mutual fund industry, which is, it's like this huge multi-billion-dollar in revenue industry that makes a lot of money. And most of the mutual funds underperform the market, right? They suck, right? And so you can be a mediocre portfolio manager and you can make millions of dollars, right? Like you can suck in finance and make a lot of money, right? There's a huge middle ground. There's a lot. Wall Street is deep and wide, and it's, look, sure, the top people on Wall Street in finance, they make an extraordinary amount of money, right? But there's a huge amount of people in the middle that still do really well. In the gaming industry, you've got the fortune at the very top, maybe a very small middle people who can eke out a living, and then just most people, it's just starvation, right? So it's definitely has different dynamics, and it creates the whole dynamics of the game industry are very unique. And having been in finance and in games, like I don't see a lot of parallels, to be honest. They're very different.
Would you say it's a lot coming down to luck, or are there kind of aspects that you can kind of control and prepare for, sort of use your smarts to win? Or maybe like strategies like connecting with other entrepreneurs to learn information faster than other people? I
believe that it's not just pure luck. I don't think people could have the motivation to go into it if you just thought it was pure luck. You try to find an opportunity where you think that there's an experience missing that you think would be really fun to bring to the market. And so you try to pursue that, and you have to bring in a creative team to work with an engineering team to make the product work. And then you hope that you capture that idea that you had, right, and execute on it well. And then you hope that by the time you bring that to market, that it's still relevant, and you hope that the platform you're launching on is going to be receptive to it, and that the market environment is going to work for it. So all those things have to come together, and you do your best to try to line them up, but sometimes they don't. Like I've seen not only been part of good teams that have made good attempts but weren't successful, and I've seen a lot of other teams that made really good attempts and it just didn't happen. I think it's a little bit of both. You need to have talent and you need to have a little bit of luck.
Do you personally use these lean startup methods like iterative design and customer development, like Steve Blank talks about, when you build these apps and companies, or do you have a different take on it?
So for example, we're making a game right now, and it's iterative in that, hey, we get the first version of the game. It's a build, like we play it, we're launching it, we're adjusting it as we go, and we're continuing to develop it. And so we put it in front of users and get feedback on it really early. But sometimes one of the interesting things about games, especially the types of games that I make, which are mobile, free to play, very consumer friendly type experiences, the difference between really good and great can come down to the visual effects that are tacked on to a little piece of art and the way something responds. Very small details can actually have pretty large impacts, and you can't necessarily predict where that line is, right? So the game I created, Cookie Jam, that was by far the most successful game I've been a part of. There was a point in its cycle where the feedback we were getting was really poor, and the difference between getting it from that poor state to where the feedback started to become really great wasn't that much, right? And so if we had stopped and not gone that extra polish, I don't know that it would have had the same outcome. Those lines are not, nobody draws them for you, right? Like there's no way to actually predict where that line is that you need to cross in terms of having moved a product from good to great. It's not necessarily clear how you get there, and so you have to try to move lots of pillars forward to try to bring the whole thing across.
So Cookie Gem was your most successful game. Was that a Facebook game?
It was primarily a mobile game, but we built it on Adobe Air, which is a platform that at the time supported Facebook Canvas, iOS, and Android, right? So it was like you built on one platform, and you got all you got a product on all three. So we actually, for that game, we won the Facebook, we were awarded Facebook Game of the Year. I think that was 2014 for the Facebook experience, which I thought was actually really great as a Facebook game.
Was that a Flash type technology or?
Yeah. So Air was basically Flash, right? So it was a Flash game, right? So Flash on the client, and then the Air platform was Adobe's attempt to try to have Flash work on mobile. And I haven't followed the platform recently, but I'm pretty sure it's pretty much done. Adobe's no longer supporting Air, so I think all the Air games are being phased out.
I'm curious to learn about the process you took to sell your company, Mob Science, to SGN Games. How did you approach that? Did you, for example, look at Crunchbase and, okay, who are the companies that have a lot of money that could acquire here, and then go on data.com and find like a biz dev guy and then email him and meet with him? What exactly did you do to sell your company?
I tried to just create a process. I'm a believer that if you're trying to get a deal with a third party, whether it's raising financing or selling your company, if you can create a marketplace and reach as many people as possible, you have the best opportunity to find the right partner and the best fit. And so the one thing that's good about the gaming industry is that it's pretty easy to, people know who all the players are, right? It's pretty easy to identify them. Having been a developer in the space for quite a while, it was pretty clear how to get the message out to the kind of entire market. And so I have a friend, David Kay, who started a service called Gaming Insiders. And it was kind of a group of CEOs, right? And I told David, I said, hey, look, I want to, Mob Science was facing a difficult time in terms of the transition from Facebook to mobile. We needed to find a partner to continue operating, right? And so I said, let's try to reach out to as many of the gaming companies we can. And so David actually had him put together a brief description of who we are without naming who we are and saying like, hey, is anybody interested? Would anybody be interested in acquiring this company? Here's a brief description of where they are. Let me know and I'll connect you. And so I was able to have him kind of broadcast that really wide to the market without having to signal, who we are, details of what was going on, right? Which was really effective because he got a big response from that. And then I wrote a personal email to everybody providing more detail. And then I kind of structured it as a process. I said, look, and I'm going to identify, the people that are interested in proceeding forward by this date, so let me know. And I provided them enough information to find out if they were interested, right? And so then I just kind of moved everybody through a funnel. We ended up having about 3 people at the end of that process that were, seriously interested and developed into kind of term sheet stages with all 3. And then SGN at the end made the most sense for us to go with, and I think they're probably pretty happy about how that outcome turned out for them.
So you sold the company actually when it was having like a little bit of a rough period, it sounds like.
Yeah, it would definitely qualify, as they say, as an acqui-hire.
Okay. You guys basically started having a bit of financial trouble and was wondering about maybe even like needing to close the company down, but then you switched to essentially selling the company and doing it in kind of like a strategic way.
At this point, right, we're clearly running out of money. We clearly had botched navigating the movement of platforms from Facebook to mobile, and this is something that's really interesting to happen is like Facebook was the platform. You'd be able to get 10 million DAU, and then mobile started, and then mobile didn't have that DAU. They didn't have the revenue. At first, mobile, you weren't even allowed to do in-app purchases, right? So like the free-to-play gaming started out to be to not be a good business on mobile. And the same thing happened with Zynga, like a very large company, right? Like they missed the transition to mobile, and they missed it because, one of my Wall Street friends used to have an expression. The way he described it is they couldn't take the heroin needle out of their arm, right? Like they were making so much money on Facebook platform that it just didn't make any sense for them to divert their resources to mobile, which, like, I guess it was kind of obvious that it was coming and was going to be humongous, but it wasn't at that time, right? And so, just thinking back, that was probably just a really terrible strategic error that we made by not aggressively moving to mobile quick enough. It was still too lucrative on Facebook, but as that platform just kind of collapsed, we didn't have the financials to continue and move to mobile. So
what would have been some things you could have done to have improved in that situation? Like basically hire iPhone app developers sooner type thing, or
well, yeah,
start experimenting earlier?
We did a deal with Zynga they were starting a publishing platform for Facebook Canvas, right? Where they were going to publish these games, and basically Zynga made us an offer that we couldn't refuse to build a Canvas game for the company, right? Where the type of numbers of people that they were offering to deliver to this game if we made it were so enormous that it was like, okay, you can't not do that deal, right? Because if they delivered that type of users on Facebook Canvas, forget about mobile. Like we would have made, for our small little studio, would have been huge outcome, right? And so we made that bet. And in hindsight, that turned out to be a bad bet because, first of all, the Zynga decided to just shit can the entire third-party publishing platform, right? So not only did our game never get any significant traffic from Zynga, none of the other games did who are part of this publishing effort. Because Zynga was dealing with its own issues. It was struggling in its transition from being a public company whose stock went from like 14 to 3, from being 85% of its revenues on Canvas to now everybody paying attention to what's happening on mobile. And so we didn't have a mobile game. We had a Facebook Canvas game for them. And they're like, well, that's not really interesting to our business anymore. So from the time we signed that deal to when we were ready to deliver the product, the world changed under our feet. I mean, and that's what's so fascinating, I think, about technology industry is that the platforms under our feet like are always changing, right? And you can never predict, right? Like it is walking on a volcano, no matter what platform you're on, right? And you never, when does that fall through, and when do you get hosed? And so I think that we probably, in hindsight, if it's hard to see. It's easy to look back and go, oh, well, we should have just not done that deal, and we should have just gone and created a mobile product. But I guess the lesson that I would take from it, going forward is just how important it is to be on the right platform in the right time. Because if you're not, you can get stuck on an island, and that's where we were, and that's why we needed to find a home.
Yeah, one of my heroes is Ray Kurzweil, and that's what he talks about. Like one of the keys to being successful as an entrepreneur is timing. And so you timed it awesome with the Facebook platform in those early days, but then you kind of had that heroin needle in your arm that kept you to it when times shifted to mobile.
Yeah, and so I think you get it's really interesting once you develop a business how reliant upon the innovator's dilemma is, it's easy academically to look at that and go, oh, like it's so obvious that these platforms are the new platforms. And it's not like I wasn't paying attention to mobile. I certainly was following it. I strongly believed in the rise of that platform. So it's not like I wasn't aware of it. It's not like Zynga wasn't aware of what it, Mark Pincus is an extremely brilliant and intelligent person and has very much his ear to the ground in terms of directionally what's happening in the technology industry. But there's such an inertia in terms of everything that you build for a particular platform that to actually cut that off and knowing when and where and at what point to really switch to a new platform is really challenging in practice.
Could we shift gears to your experience on Y Combinator?
Sure.
And Daniel was in Y Combinator, and I think he really enjoyed the experience. Could you tell us about some of the highlights there? I'm guessing it was a good experience for you.
Yeah. So the Y Combinator experience was look. I love Y Combinator. I loved the people. I loved the partners. Yes, so much of that was a great experience. And then I guess maybe this is this is very, very particular to me, but we were coming out, my co-founder and I were coming out of having launched a very successful product. And I think we went into Y Combinator with really just the barest of an idea. And in reality, like it's a very difficult proposition to have the charter of building a successful company from scratch and start and to be ready to stand in front of a demo day and show traction in 12 weeks. Like that's just, and look, people have done it, right? And certainly people whip together, their business 2 days before demo day at Y Combinator and were successful. We weren't. We failed really, I would say, spectacularly. It was just a really, really sad, sad outcome. That became that was a very hard moment for me personally. And so it was very
could you rewind on that? Well, so you had just exited from Mob Science, and then in 2014 summer you joined up Y Combinator. So did you say that you kind of viewed like your attempt to build a company during that summer as a failure?
Yeah, I would say like from a and look, I think I believe as I think it's now like kind of it's become part of accepted kind of talking about like failure as learning, and and I believe that, and I believe that the failures are ultimately beneficial to us as people as we grow and evolve. But man, it sucked bad for me personally. Like at the end of the Y Combinator, I personalized my work to a fault, and so I didn't have it in my plan that that it would end like that, right? That wasn't part of my plan, and so and I didn't think. I'm an experienced entrepreneur. I've started a lot of ventures. Like it wasn't like my first rodeo. Like, so, to feel like you can come into that and have such a support system that the Y Combinator provides, which is fantastic, right? I have no excuses, right? I just like, we didn't do well. We picked an error. We made a lot of mistakes and ended up, having our venture just total flame out, like just really bad. And so that became a very, that was not that for the personal side of going through that was not good. But I think it's I don't regret it. I don't regret it. And I highly recommend Y Combinator because I think it's really a fantastic group, and I think that the partners there are really amazing, and they're really truly giving of their time and energy to try to help people. They're really sincere in that, and it's so in that sense I love Y Combinator, and in my own personal sense of my journey through there, it was one of the most terrible times in my life.
And I actually have no idea what the details were of the product you were working on at the time. So you had just left the kind of Facebook Canvas type space, and I think at that time you were starting to think, oh, I should have invested more in mobile. So during that summer of 2014, did you work on mobile apps?
Yeah, no. So the Cookie Jam was primarily mobile. We made it mobile first, even though it was a multi-platform game, right? So in 2013, we made that game as a mobile game, and so we that thing was a huge mobile hit, right? So we had built a very, very successful mobile product, even though it was done as under SGN. It was our studio in San Diego that did it. So we felt that I think we had probably a little bit of overconfidence in our capabilities of building a mobile product, and we thought we could take the kind of same things that we had learned from gaming and apply them to a different vertical. And so we kind of approached it from a, hey, what's an opportunity here, rather than maybe what would we be personally interested in pursuing. And I think that was one of the mistakes we made. So we ended up creating an app called Swiper, and the idea was that we would kind of create a Tinder for shopping, right? So we'd create a very gamified shopping experience where, from a data perspective, we would suck in the data from all these different retailers. We'd take all their content, and we would layer a very consumer-friendly shopping experience where a consumer could go through and flip through on their phone and find really interesting things that they wanted to buy from multiple stores in one interface. So it's like a one app that let you shop everything in a really fun, gamified way. At the time on paper, that sounded like, hey, that could be amazing, right? But it was harder to build in 12 weeks to get to that product to have consumers find it interesting enough for them to want to stick with it.
And was it it's interesting to hear that you've kind of like reflected on that experience and kind of view it as a fail. Was it just the fact that you didn't build like a hit app there and it didn't get a huge traction uptake? Or was there more to the story, like, for example, like over investing into development, like paying too much money to designers and developers and then having like major financial harm from that?
No, it was about missing on the product, right? So we actually built the product, we stood up the product, we pivoted the product. So we ended up changing it from Swiper, a mobile app, to this app called Hote Day, which was going to be more of like a gamified, more directly gamified, where users could vote on what their favorite idea was for in a particular theme. So we were rapidly iterating and pivoting. I mean, my partner, Dan, who I've been partners with now for 20 years, like he's an amazing engineer, right? So he can build stuff really quickly and that works. And so we didn't spend very much money. And in fact, we still have our Y Combinator company. It still exists. We still keep it and we still have capital in it that we expect at some point one day we're going to figure out a cool idea to run with it. And so we haven't given up yet on our Y Combinator venture. It's just been delayed for a while. It just we just whiffed in terms of building something that people want, right?
It sounds like you followed a similar process as you did with Cookie Jam, right? Where you just had an idea of what might work and you tried it out, but it was just a miss on that round.
Yeah, I mean, I think similar approach. I think with Cookie Jam, like I brought to the table, like having been making games for 5 years, free to play, where on Facebook I had launched probably 50 products, right? So I had a really good connection, and I still do. I have a really good kind of domain expertise in the marketplace. So I really understood what consumers liked and didn't like, right? And I do in the mobile gaming space. I went into this vertical in the fashion industry where, I feel pretty good about like our ability to make, software and make it so that it's consumer friendly. But I really didn't know what people wanted in the fashion industry, right? I would talk to my wife and she was trying to be helpful and give me her point of view, but it's not. I just didn't have that domain expertise, and it, like I think that can cut both ways. I think sometimes being totally ignorant can allow you to hit upon something really unique and amazing, but sometimes being totally ignorant causes you to completely miss the ball. And that's why I think Y Combinator's advice is like, hey, the best product to build is a solution for something that you yourself find problematic, because then at least you're building for one user, right? And we ended up building a product that, and the thing about coming from free to play games is we were able to track the numbers really well, and we knew the retention sucked really bad. We're like, so yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's better to build something that 100 people just love, compared to something that 100,000 people just just sort of like in a mediocre way.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree.
If you had more time, would you have stuck with that idea? So say, what would you have done differently with that initial idea of shopping? Like what lessons would you have learned if you stuck with it? I feel like sometimes, like Jeff Bezos, he said it takes about 8 years for Amazon to get an idea off the ground. And I'm like, 8 years? Would you have stuck with it if you had more time? Or would you have, like, what would you have done differently if you, walking into Y Combinator day one, like, what would you do differently if you just walked in?
Yeah. So I think it's a great question. And one of the partners, when we're doing our pitching right before demo day, pulled me aside and it's like, Michael, he's like, do you really give a shit about this? Like what you're building? And I couldn't answer that honestly, right? Like I couldn't say yes, honestly. Like I was really wanting, here's what with Y Combinator. Look, I think like a lot of us who have gone through Y Combinator, like I think I had read Jessica's book, Founders at Work, and I'd read PG's essays, and like they're so insightful, and it's just this kind of history of success that it's always been super interesting to be a part of that. And I think I wanted the success of starting a successful Y Combinator company rather than, I think that's what I was focused on, and that was what I was looking for rather than any particular, I didn't really have a particular kind of problem that I was looking to solve. I didn't have an insight into a market that I was following. I didn't see a platform that was rising that was exciting to me. So I was really like, okay, I'm in Y Combinator. I've got a blank canvas. Well, what should we do, right? We got a short period amount of time to try to decide something. And so it was really that unfortunately, I think is what drove me at that time. And if I could do it again, I would only, well, number one, I would only want to do it again if I had found something that I wanted to do, right? Like, so it was driven like whatever, like let's say I wanted to do some new thing in blockchain or VR, or I saw there was a need for a marketplace, or like that's the only reason I would ever do it again. I would never start a company just to start a company because you don't have then the kind of intrinsic I think motivation to work through the times that suck, which no matter what you're doing, like there's times that suck, right? There's work that isn't fun to do that just needs to be done. And you have to have a greater underlying motivation to get that done. If you want to be successful, in my opinion. So yeah, that's what I guess would
have you learned any approaches or techniques to like find that gut feeling that would be like kind of an appropriate driver for starting a company? Because it sounds like you in a way you didn't really have your heart into like solving this particular problem with that company during YC, but I'm guessing that you've tried to sort of improve from that point. Has it just been kind of a walking on the beach in San Diego soul searching experience, or something else?
No, I don't think I think I'm more careful about what I choose to spend my time on, because I think I understand through experience now that when you commit to something, that it's a marathon. It's not. There's very few lottery tickets where you spend $1 and win $1 million, right? Like there's just very few of those. Like, not to say that they don't happen, but those are exceptions, not the rule. Most things, most businesses take time and effort and energy. And I read somebody wrote this about finding the idea. They said it's not about what you're most passionate about. It's like, what are you willing to really put in the hard work for, right? And I think when you think about it just in a longer term time frame, and you realize that, I think one of the things I've started to do now is just let things sit for longer before going with them. I love creating ideas and thinking about new things all the time, but now I'm more willing to kind of let them sit. And then in 2 weeks I go, oh, well, that was kind of not that interesting after all. So I think putting some time in between kind of ideas and being more willing to pull the plug early is probably more kind of my approach now.
Yeah, it's like recognizing it's not going to be a short-term experience, short-term win. It's like it's going to be a marathon, and you need to be able to sort of visualize yourself out like 5 years, 10 years from now, still doing this and kind of feeling comfortable with it, and like it's a valuable contribution.
Yeah. I think that one thing that somebody gave me this advice. They said, like, if you're trying to have to like create a system for you to work on something, right? Like if you're like, oh, I have this task to do to move things forward, and like you start procrastinating, like that procrastination is actually very valuable feedback, because if it's something that you're really gonna be passionate about pursuing, like you're gonna really be willing to give that effort, you're not gonna procrastinate on it, right? Like procrastination is not gonna be a problem. So I like to work on things so I don't worry ever about like procrastination, because I feel like the things that I'm procrastinating on are things that I don't want to do. And so I think that it's a good signal to listen to find what's true to your things that matter to you.
Would you mind if we shift gears to talk about the Luna DNA and blockchain? I'm really curious about that.
Sure.
I was reading about some of the technology, somehow using the blockchain to help people share their genome information and sort of incentivize that. Could you tell us more about that? Because I actually really have no clue about how that works or why that would work.
Yeah, so I think that as just always being a fan of like what's happening in the technology space, I've been really interested in the blockchain, and I started getting interested in Bitcoin back in 2013, and just following it. Unfortunately, never pulling the trigger early enough on Bitcoin to be fully retired by now. I missed that window. But
I know how that feels. Yes.
There was a Y Combinator partner. I'll Gary Tan, who I'm Facebook friends with, and he's just like, this is gonna forever. I will live with this forever. He was like sharing like, hey, there's this new thing called Ethereum, and everybody should check it out and buy some of this, right? And he posted that, and I looked at it and I was like, oh, this is really cool. Yeah, I like this. Like, and I like bookmarked it, and I was like, I'm gonna buy some of this, right? And it was like, I don't know what it was, like 3 cents, or whatever right now, right? And of course I never did, right? And so that's just just one of those things, right? But it made me really interested in following like what Ethereum was doing. You started to really understand that, like, hey, this is kind of going to enable new architecture of software and how the world is organized, where you can remove kind of a centralized authority, and it starts to open up lots of really, I think, interesting. I think there's going to be a whole stack of protocols and then on top of that, a set of applications across various industries. And so I believe this is happening right now, and I don't know where we are in terms of like the ultimate timeline, or this may be 10 years, it may be 2 years. I can't predict that, but it seems like a really interesting reorganization of everything. And so, as being in San Diego, there's a company called Illumina. Illumina is the pioneer, or one of the pioneers, and certainly now the kind of undisputed market leader of genomic sequencing, right? And so, being in San Diego, there's all these people from Illumina that have helped grow that company to now a $35 billion publicly traded company. With over 3,000 employees, and there's a lot of that talent that was a part of that story here in San Diego. And so I ended up becoming friends through a mutual friend of the former chief engineering officer at Illumina. He joined the company when there were 30 people and left it when there were 3,000. And they're just brilliant, really amazing people that have been super successful. And one of the things that they're interested, that I think that one of the problems they see now in the world is that all this data is being created and it's starting to become siloed into different silos, right? And so Bob Kane, who's the CEO of Luna DNA, has worked on numerous attempts to try to break down these silos, right? And so when my other co-founder David Lewis, him and I have been talking about the blockchain and what it means, the decentralization. I was talking to him about Filecoin, and how that worked and how it was incentivizing people to share their hard drive space and be able to earn Filecoin for it. And he said, what if we use that model? His idea was like, hey, what if we took that model and used it to get people organized and incentivized to share their genomic information and break down those silos and bring it all together into a community-owned database. And it just seemed to make a lot of sense. It seemed to the emerging technology of blockchain seemed to be what would enable this to happen now. And I find, the genomic information and the DNA information, just a really fascinating space. And it has the potential, I think, to, really make a positive impact on the world in terms of understanding our healthcare and longevity. And it has a very strong underlying mission of being able to do something for the greater good. And so that was really appealing. And so that's just, it's totally different than mobile gaming. But it's been a really fascinating journey so far.
What's the idea behind it? Is it like literally like taking your entire genome and then putting that on the blockchain, and then that gets sort of propagated to all the other sort of blockchain wallets or something? Or is it just like subsets? Or
so there's the way that kind of the genomic information that exists today is there's different kind of categories of detail that you get on your, so the whole genome, right, is this like, it's ultimately a very large file, and it's still very relative expensive to get your whole genome sequenced. And so then there's the exome, which is a different part of your genome that also reads very detailed data. And then there's these samples of that they call genotypes, right? Where they take what are called SNPs. And so the 23andMe and Ancestry are genotypes, and they take a sample of your. It's done through a different technology than sequencing. It's called an array, and so the summary is that the genotypes are a smaller amount of genetic information, but still very valuable. We don't understand ultimately how much value is locked in there, because it's all really new for us to have this much genotype information from everybody, right? So Ancestry probably has, I think collectively between Ancestry and 23andMe, there's probably over 10 million people now that have their genotype information. And this is a file, a 30 meg file that you own if you've gotten your 23andMe test done, right? You own that file. And so our initial premise is that, hey, come bring that file to us, and we will give you a Luna DNA token in exchange for that, as kind of minting, the way to mint these tokens and seed this collective community of people that are sharing the genetic information that they own into kind of a community-owned database, so that ultimately that we can do research on this collective data and combine it with phenotypic data, which is kind of personal health data, so that we can try to gain health insights and ultimately find discoveries for diseases that affect us as humanity.
So that 30 megabyte file would be basically like shared on the ledger and then just propagated to all the other nodes in the blockchain?
No,
or is it still stored like at a particular server and then there's just like an address reference?
yeah. So the idea is that we de-identify a user by attaching their wallet ID, and then separating their name and information from it, but that the actual genetic information would be uploaded to a secure, centralized database that we would operate initially, right? The idea that we set up a public benefit corporation that would ultimately, over the long term, transition as the blockchain stack matured, and you had solutions that could be decentralized storage and decentralized compute. But in order to drive genetic discovery, where you're going to study this data, there's not a compute environment that would make sense, right? So if you put your blockchain data, if you put your genomic data into a blockchain and disperse it, right, into all these little parts, it's really hard to bring together to do studies on all this aggregate data, right? And so we've kind of taken a hybrid approach and said, look, what's the most valuable part of the blockchain model, which is really kind of the decentralized ownership aspect to it. But we're trying to build a practical database that researchers can actually use to study this information and find discoveries.
That's amazing. I just feel like there's real potential there. I don't know exactly the direction it's going in, but it's similar to when you were early on in the Facebook app space, where it was like, I feel like there's potential there. Don't know where it's going to go, and you're just kind of getting started with little experiments.
You guys know what precision medicine is at all?
Well, I'm not. I don't claim to be the genetic or the healthcare guy in Luna DNA at all. I think my expertise is really on the building consumer friendly software. So that's where I focus. So I think I'm just learning about all of this, and it's part of what makes it really fun, right? Is because it's a huge learning experience.
If you bring in genomics, it changes the game. You're going to see way more about a person and what drugs actually might work for them over time with other attributes, like if you pull in other stuff into your database.
Ultimately, and look, I don't know if it's going to be us or not, right? But I think ultimately the world will benefit for there to be kind of all the data in a centralized place where people can research this and look for those and find those opportunities for solving problems that have otherwise gone unnoticed. It just feels like a really big and important mission to be a part of contributing to.
Well, it also feels like a bit of a open source movement with respect to the genome data. I don't know of any place where you can go to find open source human DNA. Maybe it exists, but with the Luna DNA, you're looking at allowing individuals to share their genome and then contribute to a pool and then have sort of a community build up around that data to sort of mine it and explore and find maybe cures to diseases. Is that how you're envisioning it, as sort of an open source human genome?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good analogy, right? I think it's really, I mean, our kind of mission is really about just kind of making this community owned, database, so that there's not any one entity has an incentive to kind of control or silo this data. It's like, hey, there's different efforts going on where you've seen drug companies say like, hey, we're going to sequence this population of 50,000 people, and then we're going to study for drugs, and then we're going to get the benefit of that data, and we're not going to share that data with anybody else. And I get it from that drug companies. They've got shareholders. They're motivated by their individual profit motive. But is that what's best for us as humanity? I don't think so, right? I think that it's the best for humanity and for finding out more information about our healthcare is that all our data is in a place where everybody can have access to study it. That's kind of the underlying intent. How we ultimately get to that vision, I think there's a lot of challenges and there's a lot of roads to navigate to get there, but that's kind of the underlying driving vision.
Yeah, as you were describing that, I was thinking of it as like Linux, the creation of Linux. It was sort of an open source operating system, but then other companies were able to build on top of that, like Red Hat, and provide sort of value-added consulting services and things. So kind of in the same way with the human genome data, there needs to be like an open source shared pool, but then there's still business opportunities to add on top of that.
Yeah, no, I think that the Linux and Red Hat analogy is a great analogy.
Would you say that LunaCoin, is it built on like Ethereum, or is it built on a technology? You guys are building your own type of coin?
Right now, the coin is being built as a ERC20 token, which is the Ethereum based token. And I think like it wouldn't make sense to build like the way we're organizing right now. We just don't think it makes sense to like build our own blockchain, because it's almost like some of these things there's some places where you can go and you could store your genome in a blockchain, but how is that really helpful to anybody? Like I think like just because you can do something, just because you can put something in the blockchain doesn't mean that it should be in the blockchain, right? Like and so I just I take a more kind of practical approach and saying like, well, what is it that we want to accomplish here, right? We want to create a community-owned database, and we want to try to break down these silos, and we want to make the information useful for people to come and study. And right now, like, you need to have high availability storage and high compute power to run studies on this data. And so I'm not able to see in the short term like how that would exist in the blockchain. Maybe it does in the longer term. And so that's why, as a community-owned database, that could be an eventual path to where it migrates. But I think we want to try to. We think that there's an opportunity to actually do some research in the short term, and so we want to enable that.
Daniel and I are really grateful for you taking the time to speak with us. We're just wondering if you had any asks for our audience.
Thanks for listening. If you got all the way through here, I'm happy to connect with anyone. So you can connect with me on LinkedIn, and feel free just to reach out. Let me know you heard me here, and I'll be happy to. If there's anything I can do to help you, I'll do my best.
Yeah, Daniel said that he first met you in kind of a mentor type context at the Inner Space, and I really felt like I've learned a lot. You've been a mentor to me the last hour, so I want to thank you for being here today with us.